Welcome to Underdog Rising with your host, Wade Posehn, where we ignite your journey from humble beginnings to greatness through inspiring tales of top executives and entrepreneurs. Hey everybody, welcome to Underdog Rising. Today we have Ries with us, and it is really great to have him here today as he has such a successful story behind him from where he started to where he is today in the cryptocurrency space. So Chris, thank you for joining us, man. It's really good to have you here.
It's definitely good to be here, and it's been quite a journey.
No, yeah, I bet. I'm excited to get into that today. So, just to start off, do you mind just giving our listeners a little bit of background on you and who you are, and kind of just going through your origin story from where you started to where you are today?
Yeah, I think the current long and short of it is I co-founded a venture-backed crypto payment startup, um, and I guess we can start by going way back when to when
Yeah.
I was growing up in Silicon Valley, and then kind of meet to where we're at today.
Yeah, please. I mean, if you don't mind, just take the floor and run through that a little bit because I think it'd be great for the viewers just to maybe you don't have to go too deep because we'll go into certain questions, but kind of just follow them along your path so that they can know like where you started and then, certain jobs that you had, even if it was at restaurants or, valet or anything of that sort. Because I know people go through varying different elements and then, grow throughout the years.
Yeah, yeah. So. Like most people, had some odd jobs starting out, but grew up in what was once a really small place in Silicon Valley, kind of near towards San Jose area. At the time, growing up there, it was just really getting started. I'm a '90s kid, early '90s kid, so
Yeah.
grew up in a couple boom and bust cycles. Um, at one point was all apricot orchards until it became flourished with all these big tech companies and
Wow.
all these high paying jobs. But growing up there was really cool. My parents, their jobs took them there in the mid '90s. Grew up there. Was kind of a trip, in the earliest stages. It was a place where everyone who was kind of like a first generation person in the US, or kind of anybody that was in the US looking for their kind of foothold into technology, moved out there. And you met some really eclectic, interesting people there very early on that you wouldn't be able to have access to kind of at this current day and stage. I guess one of these stories would be my neighbor was an early employee at Apple, and I remember Steve Wozniak coming over. He was an early investor in the Segway.
No.
He brought over this really crazy looking device, and I saw them using it up and down the road. And it was just such a wild concept that you can kind of lean and you have this
And you're
device
all,
that's moving you forward at crazy speeds and all sorts of stuff like that. So like you'd see that kind of stuff all the time. Now it's like, self-driving cars and stuff, but it was
it's everywhere.
definitely
Yeah.
a cool place to grow up. And it seemed like everybody was an underdog there, and everyone kind of got
Yeah.
their start there and really kind of worked their way up, and did some cool stuff to really shape the technology space.
Yeah. Wow, dude. Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, you've had such a wonderful journey and then, we'll get into it a little bit later, but like just to see where you are today and how you've plugged yourself in. I mean, you worked at Oracle and, now you're decided to start your own element as well. So, I just want to dive into some questions so that our listeners can get a better understanding of your career trajectory. So, based on your work experience, you've always worked in the product and engineering side, and especially in cyber and cloud security, right? So, very big industries overall. Was that the path that you chose, or did you just kind of fall into it along the way?
No, I mean, I got a really lucky break to start my technology career.
Yeah.
When I was at UC Irvine, I was in a CS degree, and it was heavily impacted, so it was hard to get classes. And I remember I wasn't able to get a full kind of quarter's worth of classes, so I
Mm.
had to go part time. So I could only take 2 classes. So I had all this time left over. I'm paying all this money to be in Irvine, and I can't even get the classes. So I ended up applying to what at the time was an early stage. There's less than 20 people startup, and it was a very ambitious startup that was the name was Silence, and they were
Mm.
trying to reinvent antivirus like Norton or McAfee or any of the old
Yeah.
legacy guys with AI. And this was, you have to remember, this was like 10 plus
Right.
years ago. This is like the
So ahead of its time. Right.
OG AI that reinvented a complete industry,
Oh,
and ended up working there. I got the job, like couldn't believe it.
unreal.
Um, so I got the job there. I was working on their data science team, building data pipelines so that they could build the models, and did anything and everything that they asked. If it was to take out the trash, I'll take out the trash. Not too proud to do anything. I'm at the bottom rung at this company, and quickly realized that this was like a rocket ship company. I mean,
Wow.
it ended up being a company that got acquired for almost 1.5 billion by BlackBerry. I think it was 2017,
Mm.
2018. But being part of that like early 20-person team and getting to spend a few years there was I mean, I don't know how you get that lucky, but I ended up getting really lucky, and that was the first place I worked.
That's incredible. I feel like that, how you say that you didn't really choose that path, but it's almost like it was ordained for you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because even now, when you look to where you are, you've always had that mentality and that mindset to roll up your sleeves and get in there to make things successful, right? I mean, you're kind of in that space with Sphere One and the cryptocurrency space. It's get down to brass tacks and make things happen. So that's really cool that that's been with you this whole time.
Yeah, no, it was definitely a great journey, and was a humbling place to start. Um, finished my degree at UC Irvine, and got some years of work experience under my belt, and ended up moving back up north to Silicon Valley after that kind of chapter closed.
Wow, man, so exceptional. So, by having been in that space, like, is there any particular advice that you would give somebody that's just starting out, say in those fields? Like, are there any like specific certifications or courses or experiences you recommend, right? Maybe it's not a certification and it's like, hey, just roll your sleeves up, get involved and learn from experience. Like, what would you say to those?
Yeah, I would say um, kind of the diamonds in the rough that nobody really looks for are like these really early stage startups where it's
Mm.
like it maybe they're not well capitalized, and maybe it's like a really risky kind of bet they're trying to make on some new innovation or market, but a lot of times they're really approachable, and the competition that
Hmm.
you face trying to get into those early stage companies is far fewer than like if you go apply to Google or Amazon or whatever, insert like
Gotta be.
Fortune
Yeah.
500
Big
company,
name.
right?
Yeah.
So I would say like, especially in this kind of job market, like really the people that are hiring the most are these really early stage startups. And it's kind of like, if you can find, a company that's doing something big and ambitious, um, in some hot space like AI or something, like you might as well throw your hat in the ring, and, you can do some really kind of crafty, nifty stuff like reaching out to venture capitalists, like the best VCs.
Mm.
Reach out to them. They have recruiters on staff. You can even DM their partners or something like that on Twitter. A lot of them have their DMs open. Like
Very
ask them
smart.
like, hey, if you're to bet on your racehorse of the $1 billion you've invested in early stage companies, like what's your racehorse that you'd pick, and like do they
Uh,
have any jobs open for me to kind of go work here?
wow. I
And
think
you'd be
that's such
surprised at what you could find.
I think that's such a unique tactic, because I think so often people want to take the regular route, right? Let me work on my resume, make sure I got keywords, let me apply to the role. But like you're also adding a different element of like going out there and having a conversation with them online, right? Where a lot of them live. So, but then also take a different approach, like asking them, right? And inserting terminology around, what racehorse are you going to bet on, and just initiating that conversation. So I think that that's really cool. If someone were to take the sort of regular route, right, go through LinkedIn or a job board, are there any certain elements that one should like add to their resume if they're trying to reach out and work for early stage startup?
I think there's kind of two routes. There's like, what are your certifications?
Hmm.
And then it's kind of like, what social capital do you have? And like, you can kind of go either route. Like, I can go to Harvard and maybe you achieve the same thing that maybe somebody that goes to community college gets, or like somebody
Hmm.
that doesn't even go to college altogether, right? So like, I
Yeah.
think credentials is really only one aspect of how you can look at somebody. And then like the other side is like, who is this person? Who do they know? Who can vouch for them that, is within my circle that
Hmm.
maybe I respect, or,
Yeah.
that I trust. And that's a potential other way that you can kind of route your way to a job, more often than just kind of like, having your Harvard MBA or whatever, because it just seems like that the bar continues to go up and up and up and up and up. And then like,
Hmm.
how do you differentiate between the Harvard and the Stanford guy and all this other stuff? So I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it's a unique way to look at it, is like,
I
this kind of like
agree.
social capital aspect, um, that I think a lot of people don't really tap into that much.
Yeah, right. I'm right there with you, and I think it kind of ties into that this or that segment question around networking events or LinkedIn recommendations, right? I think there's certain people have different preferences, but it at the end of the day, it comes down to connecting with individuals, touching base with them, and then that way, you never know what opportunities might come to you. So it's always valuable to have friends and just network in general. So I do want to touch base on Sphere One, right? Like I think that that's so exciting, and I get pumped about it because it's so new to the space, and like you guys are. I mean, it has its own Underdog Rising story in itself, right? So, for the listeners, would you mind just giving a little bit of inside information as to what Sphere One is, and then I have a few questions around that I'd just like to ask you as well.
Yeah, so Sphere One is a payments platform that allows you to make crypto payments across
Hmm.
any different blockchain, because there's this really unique problem where like the blockchains don't talk to each other. So it's very hard to get stores of value from like a Bitcoin to an Ethereum, for
Hmm.
example, because they're totally different technologies. So what we built, we kind of built this really cool payment network that allows you to pay across all these different networks seamlessly in a like a one-click checkout kind of scenario.
Jeez, that so phenomenal. Like you were just talking about, like, the early 90s and like seeing someone on the Segway, and it's like it was so ahead of its time. Like, I think that you guys are kind of in that similar position, right? Like, I know that there's maybe different competitors in this space, but like it feels like, cryptocurrency has really evolved so vastly over the past few years. And it's wonderful to see that you guys are in that space and taking such a passion for it, and also just a different perspective, right? Because is it involved with the gaming
Yeah, gaming is a big use
as a
case,
big
but
use case?
there some other use cases as well.
Wow, that's so phenomenal. So with Sphere One, like what made you take the step out to do your own thing and and leave corporate behind?
You know, it's kind of ironic because when I was at Oracle was kind of like when I was probably doing the best in my career and
Hmm.
making the most money, and was managing like, budget there, and um, but was actually uh, was the point in my life where I was like the most unhappiest. It's kind of
Wow.
like
Yeah.
rock bottom as far as like curiosity goes, and like self-fulfillment, and like it's weird, even though you're making like really good money, you can be like really unhappy in life, and that was the case, and really needed to
Hmm.
kind of to shake some stuff up. And it was
Yeah.
actually it was really kind of just that. I just really needed a change.
I think that's really cool because it's so often we do. just get caught up in the day-to-day activities, and we don't realize and take that mental check to be like, is this the purpose that I want to be, going after or driving after? So with that element, like, did you always at the back of your mind want to start your own company, or was it just something that you kind of stepped into along the way after you did that, went through that realization?
You know, I definitely thought I was going to be like the corporate guy that climbed the ladder and
Yeah, all the way
had
to
it
the
all
top.
figured out, and this is how the optimal
Yeah,
amount of time you stay at your job before you go shop around, and
and then
you
go to the
know
next one,
and
or
then you
yeah,
go
transition.
jump to the next company in Silicon
Yeah,
Valley and get that nice title change and 2x your salary or something like that.
right.
That's kind of what people do these days is they stay like 2-3 years, they jump,
Mm,
and then they get their
mm-hmm,
promotion and their pay increase and all that, and then they
mm-hmm.
kind of like that's the best way you can kind of like grok the corporate system because they're not super
Gotcha.
incentivized to promote you
Keep.
internally and pay
Mm-hmm.
you market when you kind of get promoted and stuff like that. So that's kind of
Right.
like how you should go about I guess like advancing your career really quickly and expediting that.
Right. Within the corporate world.
Yeah,
Right.
within
Yeah.
the corporate
Okay.
world.
No,
Yeah.
that's interesting. I think that's a good tactic for listeners to hear, because sometimes when you're starting out, you're not sure of how to go about that or how you should advance yourself in your career. And obviously that's, one element of it. But yeah, so with that being said, starting your own company wasn't necessarily always at the back of your mind. Like you wanted to go through corporate, climb the ladder, and then
Yeah.
this opportunity came along. That's cool.
And what really happened that kind of like sparked that was I kept getting kind of like looked over for promotions even though I was just busting my ass and working super hard.
Mm,
And it's kind of like I know I'm like operating at the capacity that like the next level up is, and I'm definitely
right.
creating a lot
Yeah.
of value and working
Hmm.
super hard, and I don't I shopped around at a bunch of different places. Nobody
Hmm.
saw the potential, and it's just kind of
Hmm.
like, well, maybe I just go out and do my own thing, take a big risk, and I have some money saved up. I can probably afford to kind of like take a year, and I have the
Yeah.
savings to kind of go start a company, and that's exactly what I did.
That's so that's so awesome, man. Like it's so interesting to hear, because for somebody from your background where you had early stage startup experience and then you looked into growing in the corporate world and staying tried and true, and also loyal, right? Like I know you were at Oracle for quite a long time and then, it just you did that self check and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, things aren't where I want to be. Like it's also that growth mindset, I think, for you as an individual as well, right? Like there's more that you wanted to achieve and obtain. And then all of a sudden this opportunity came out after you took that self-reflection time and then, okay, game on. Like this is a great purpose. Let's go and achieve. So it kind of leads me into my next question, seeing as certain elements have stayed with you for a long period of time. Like, can you share a personal habit or a philosophy that has helped you as an individual grow over the years that might help, the younger people in their starting out in their career?
Yeah, it's
It,
self-learning.
yes.
And it's like your ability to continue to be curious and to kind of like reinvent and improve yourself is the best way to go about doing that.
Hmm. Reinvent and improve yourself. I like that because that can be taken in all areas, right? Corporate
Yeah,
world, so your own start out, you keep pushing the boundaries and limits of yourself. And it's kind of goes back to that saying of be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
exactly.
Hmm. I like that. So, uh, touching on that point, how do you continue to learn and stay up to date in, let's say, in the fields of cybersecurity, maybe even cryptocurrency? And are there any particular like resources or platforms that people could turn to that they might not be aware of that you are aware of?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you kind of like how I go about doing that, and it's like from the moment I wake up, I have two dogs, so I go take them for about an hour walk. I have my headphones in. I'm
Nice.
listening to some audiobook, and usually it's kind of like you're learning in different mediums. So like for
Mm,
me, it could be reading, it could be an audio book, it could be the news. So I think there's a lot of ways you can do that. And uh, unfortunately, I don't have a lot of time to kind of like learn new skills that don't apply to the business, but
right.
there's a lot of cool stuff you can do learning about prior entrepreneurs like, yeah, I don't know, Steve Jobs or anybody that has any sort of like published story about their history of starting a business. And you kind of look at your own life, and you're like, man, I really don't have it that hard. Like if you've ever read The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz, who started Andreessen Horowitz or A16Z, and like that guy got kicked down like a million times. And it's like, okay, well, you put that into perspective and you're like, okay, maybe my life isn't that bad.
Wow.
Maybe things aren't going that bad.
No, I think it's great that you mentioned that though, because I was actually going to bring that up as a question. Do you have any book recommendations? So I think that, the listeners can definitely go out and check out It's Hard Things. What was the book?
The hard
Oh,
thing about hard things
okay. Yeah, I was a
is
tongue
what it's
twister
called.
there a little bit,
Yeah.
but oh
And
no, that's
that's a great kind of like
hmm,
underdog story
yeah.
of this guy kind of like going to Silicon Valley and starting out from kind of the bottom, and now he's the co-founder of the best venture capital company in the world. So, and he got
Wow.
kicked down like a million times. So it's just like it's about adversity and
Yeah,
some
handling
cool
those
stuff there.
rejections.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm even gonna go read it now. That's interesting. Circling back to a question that you mentioned, you get up, you take your dogs for a walk, and you listen to audiobooks. What time do you wake up in the mornings?
Depends on how late I was up
Or how late you
the
were up?
night
That's
before,
true.
but I'd say probably the latest I ever wake
Okay.
up is probably 7:30, 7:30.
Right, but still, I
Um,
mean, yeah, I think for most people, even some students that might be in college, that's really early at this stage in their life. So it's kind of good to just evaluate over the different people that I interview to see what time they wake up and get their day started and how they start their day. So it's really cool to know.
yeah, I think the thing I learned really early on is how important sleep was. Like if
I
you
agree
don't,
with you on that.
yeah,
I think almost it's like the success of the next day is in the preparation of the night before kind of thing too. Like guard your sleep. I know there's all these conversations about mouth tape and nose strips and
mhm,
blocking the
yeah.
blue light, and it's very interesting to see how sensitive sleep is, for your energy levels, etc., for the next day.
Yeah, and I think even like just long-term health and like neurological implications and
Mm,
all these things that maybe you don't think about. It's always like so glorified. Oh, Elon Musk, he only gets 4 hours of sleep. It's like, well, I don't know if that's a good thing, like long term for you, because sleep's
right.
a very good thing, in general. And you have lots of hours in the day. If you're efficient, you can get stuff done. Whatever you don't get done, just get it done the next day.
I agree with you. You can't burn yourself out. Otherwise, then you're just not going to have energy to keep going.
Yeah.
It's just simple as that. So a little different question for you, kind of on the spot. At any given moment in time, how many tabs do you have open on your computer screen?
I think right now I have probably 60 to 80 somewhere. I'm looking at this screen right now
Right.
we're doing the interview on, and it's like 30 just on this one, and I got a couple windows open.
Wow.
So,
That's
yeah.
impressive. You take the crown right now. Out of all people I've interviewed, you have the most tabs. So
Yeah, I don't know if that's a good or
that's
bad thing.
good. No, I know, right? But I mean, sometimes it's challenging. Some people work in bookmarks, some people don't, some people do both, but it's just you want to keep tabs open of like where you were and you go back and you reflect. Yeah, I mean, there's so many reasons, but that's cool. That's it's a lot of tabs. If someone was starting out in the fields that you've been in over life, like is there anything that they can do to help advance their career trajectory? Like I know you've spoken about reach out through social media, like there's multiple mediums in which people can learn on, but maybe are there any elements such as like learn technical skills? Do you need to have more soft skills than hard skills? Like, are there anything of that sort that they might want to focus on?
Yeah, I think there's always like if you're really really going for the quick career advancement, there's always a meta in things.
Mm,
Like maybe 3 years ago that was cryptocurrency, but now it's AI, and
right.
maybe that's nanotech in the next 3 or 4 years. So
Mm,
there's always some meta where like essentially all of the money goes, all of the jobs go,
this. Hmm.
and like the trajectory is just straight up. So like if I
Yeah.
guess like if you can identify what that looks like as early as possible and just insert yourself into that space and kind of learn as much as you can, I think that's a good start. I think the other thing I realized really early on um, is just like people are reachable. Like you kind of
Mm,
people get put on these pedestals, these entrepreneurs or these
yeah.
VCs or celebrities, and it's like a lot of times they don't respond, but like if you go about reaching out in the right way and you create value and you're trying to build like a legitimate relationship instead of just kind of like going in and asking for something up front, like you'd be surprised that like that it actually works. Like I was super surprised when like a couple people responded back, and it's just like could be like sending them like, hey, I know you're investing a lot in this space. Have you like seen this new company, or like have you read
Mm,
this new article? And it's like if you can create like little bits of value for people, it's like a compounding thing. Like that's enough to get a response.
wow. Yeah, I think so often people they just go for the ask. You
Yeah,
know what I mean? And they
yeah,
don't deliver that value and they just expect, and then they move on and they're like, oh,
yeah,
well, these
yeah,
people are impossible to get a hold of. But
yeah,
yeah, really connecting with people because at the end of the line, they're humans, and they're also exceptionally busy, as you know. So yeah, definitely hit some of that value so that you can connect with them.
yeah.
So then another sort of wild question is what apps, plugins, or software are you currently using that either is optimizing your life or is making your life easier?
That's a really good question.
So like for
There's
me, I use Notion, right? Like I
yeah,
love Notion. That's what I like. Is there any sort that you use even if it's with AI?
yeah. I also use Notion.
Love it.
That's our internal wiki, so it's great. So I feel you on that. I use Calendly, which is a great way
Hmm.
to like it seems like such a simple concept. Like you send somebody a link to like schedule a meeting,
Right.
but it's just so much easier than going back and forth to find a time where you guys can meet. That like helps conversions with meetings in a really
Yeah.
big way.
I agree. I feel like in corporate world at times that happens a lot. Even though you can like go check others' calendars, it's like back and forth between, hey, what's your schedule availability like? And it's like just here's a link.
Yeah, I'd
Uh,
say there's a bunch of really just crazy AI stuff coming out. It's just like really advancing at a fast rate so that it's really leveling the playing field. Like if you didn't know how to code up a website, but like you knew how to design one, you knew how to use Figma, you can
hmm,
quite literally have some Figma design of like some landing page, and you can even use tools that like kind of will like take a site like Apple and then kind of like build me a site similar to Apple, and then it spits out some similar site to Apple, and then essentially you can take it a step further. There's a really cool product called Builder.io. Essentially, if
okay.
you can take a Figma design and it'll spit out like the React and JavaScript code to essentially just like plug and play that thing and push it into production. And it like saves you like, dozens and dozens
Uh,
and dozens of hours of like coding this thing up, making sure all the margins are good. And it's just like, there's such cool stuff going out. So I don't
wow.
know, anything in AI. I mean, there's some cool stuff going on.
Yeah, talk about bringing simplicity to people's lives, right? And like getting
Yeah.
time back in your day. That's wild. And it's like they're now giving people the ability to sort of take life into their own hands, because sometimes you can't learn those skills, but like you said, you'll know how to design, but you can't code. But then, okay, create the code for me based off of, the design elements, and then
Yeah.
you can kind of go and create that. That's wow, that's really super cool. So, with you having originally when you started out your career working in an early stage startup, and then now you kind of going back into that startup mentality with Sphere One, and really focusing on fleshing things out and just pushing limits and boundaries. Say if there's a person who's new early on in their career, or just graduating college, and they're looking to start their own startup, and shift gears into that or side of life. Do you have any tips, tricks, or mentality elements that they should focus on if they want to kind of go that route or be prepared for?
I would say the number one thing you can do to increase the odds of success in a startup is going and finding a co-founder.
Hmm. Really?
If you go find a co-founder, statistically, the successful outcomes are way higher. And it's just nice having somebody to talk to. Like when you get beat down on like a pitch to a VC, or like a
Yeah.
customer, you lose a customer and they churn, or like something terrible
Hmm.
happens. It's like nice to have a support system there, because it's just like a very lonely life.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, because I think so often everyone focuses on, wow, they're doing it, they made it, right? They're spending time on like actually grinding things out, but like I think that's a element that no one ever really focuses on or touches on that much, right? Like it is good to have that support element to bounce ideas and kind of strategize or whatever the case may be, but just to have somebody also in your corner going through what you're going through. So no,
Definitely.
I appreciate you touching base on that. But is there any sort of any last minute ideas, tips, tricks, thoughts that might have crossed your mind that you'd like to share at all?
In the same vein of trying to be reachable, and trying to pass on any sort of anecdotal evidence, there's definitely some pass it along mentality with entrepreneurs. If anybody is watching this and kind of like needs some help starting their own business, or wants any additional information, or just wants an outlet, like, I'm a resource, so feel free to reach out. My
Oh,
DMs are open.
that's awesome. So where can they reach out to you?
Yeah, so LinkedIn, I'm there. Christopher Ries at Sphere One. On Twitter is another good one. DMs are open
Okay.
there. And then my handle is at Diddy Ries, DIDDYRIES, which is
I
a
dig it.
my favorite ice cream place in LA.
I like that backstory. Thank you for, sharing that and giving out that information so listeners or viewers can reach out to you, because I think, sometimes to them it might be challenging, like you mentioned, to
Mhm.
connect with folks, but you are reachable and there to help. And I just thank you for spending time with me and taking the time to connect and just sharing your underdog story, because it truly is, from and almost full circle, starting in early startup to being in the same mentality now. So, Chris, thank you for your time, man. It's been great.
Yeah, likewise. It's been a good
Cool.
time.